I stared at the pregnancy test in my trembling hands, and the world around me started spinning. 2 pink lines. Clear as day. Sarah had left it buried beneath some tissues in our bathroom trash, probably hoping I wouldn't notice. But I did notice, and the timing couldn't have been more suspicious. My name is James Mitchell, and 6 months ago, my wife Sarah convinced me to try something that would destroy our marriage, an open relationship. Now, here I was, on our 5th wedding anniversary, holding evidence of what could be my worst nightmare. Let me back up a bit. Sarah and I met at Stanford during our MBA program. She was brilliant, ambitious, and had this infectious laugh that could light up any room. With her honey blonde hair and green eyes that seemed to hold secrets, she captivated me from day one. We dated for 2 years before tying the knot in a lavish ceremony in Napa Valley. Everything was perfect until Sarah landed her dream job at Anderson & Brooks investment firm. Her new boss, Michael Thompson, was this charismatic guy in his early 40s who'd been featured in Fortune 500 magazine twice. Sarah wouldn't stop talking about his revolutionary business approaches and incredible mentorship. I should have seen the signs earlier. Today was supposed to be special. I had planned everything. Reservations at Le Bernardin, her favorite restaurant, followed by a surprise weekend getaway to the Hamptons. Instead, I'm sitting on our bathroom floor, trying to make sense of this revelation while simultaneously remembering all the strange behavior over the past few months. The late nights at the office. The sudden business trips to Chicago. The new lingerie I never saw her wear. The mysterious text she'd quickly hide when I walked by. But what really got to me was how she'd suggested the open marriage idea. It was during one of our date nights, after her 3rd glass of wine. "James, honey," she'd said, twirling her pasta with practiced precision, "I've been thinking about how we can grow together, explore new experiences." The way she presented it made it sound so innocent, so progressive. "Many successful couples are doing it now. It's about trust and personal growth." What a fool I was. The sound of our apartment door opening snapped me back to reality. Sarah was home early, probably to get ready for our anniversary dinner. I could hear her heels clicking against the hardwood floors, getting closer to the bathroom. "James? Are you home?" I quickly pocketed the pregnancy test, my heart pounding against my chest. I needed to play this smart. If there was one thing I'd learned about Sarah over the years, it was that she was always 3 steps ahead in any situation. Not this time. This time, I needed answers, but I also needed proof. "In here, babe!" I called out, flushing the toilet to seem natural. "Just freshening up for our big night." As I washed my hands, I caught my reflection in the mirror, 32 years old, dark hair starting to gray at the temples. Stress will do that to you, and eyes that had seen too much lately. But behind those tired eyes, a plan was forming. Sarah had no idea that I'd hired a private investigator 2 weeks ago. Tonight, during our anniversary dinner, I was expecting to receive an email that would either put my paranoid mind at ease or confirm my worst suspicions. Either way, by the end of this evening, everything would change. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a storm that would tear our perfect life apart. As I waited for Sarah to get ready for our anniversary dinner, my mind drifted back to our early days. The pregnancy test in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole through my suit, but I forced myself to remember the good times. Maybe understanding our past would help me navigate this nightmare. We weren't always the power couple we appeared to be now. Sarah came from old money. Her father, Richard Warner, owned half of Boston's prime real estate. I, on the other hand, grew up in a middle-class family in Minnesota, worked my way through college on scholarships, and spent every summer doing internships instead of vacationing in the Hamptons. When I first met Sarah at Stanford, she was different from the other trust fund kids. She worked harder than anyone I knew, determined to prove she wasn't just daddy's little princess. That's what drew me to her, that fire, that need to prove herself. "James," she told me during our first date at a hole-in-the-wall Vietnamese restaurant, "I want to build something of my own. Something that has nothing to do with my father's name." I remember looking at her that night, sauce dripping from her spring roll as she gestured enthusiastically about her dreams, and thinking she was the most authentic person I'd ever met. Our courtship wasn't smooth sailing, though. Her father initially hated me, the scholarship kid who dared to date his princess. He tried everything to break us up, from offering me a startup fund, to leave her alone, to threatening to pull strings and destroy my future career prospects. But Sarah stood by me. She even cut off her trust fund for a year to prove to her father that she was serious about us. We lived in a tiny studio apartment, ate ramen noodles, and were happier than we'd ever been. Eventually, Richard Warner realized he couldn't control his daughter and grudgingly gave us his blessing. The wedding was a compromise large enough to satisfy the Warners' social obligations but with enough personal touches to feel like us. Sarah walked down the aisle to Sweet Child O' Mine, played by a string quartet, wearing a designer dress she'd paired with Converse sneakers. God, she was beautiful. After graduation, we both landed decent jobs in finance. Sarah started as a junior analyst at Goldman Sachs while I joined a boutique investment firm. We worked insane hours but always made time for our Sunday traditions: farmers market in the morning, meal prep for the week, and movie night with takeout. Then came the incident that changed everything. 2 years into our marriage, Sarah's mother Barbara was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. Within 6 months, she was gone. Sarah was devastated. Barbara had been her best friend, the mediator between her and her father, the voice of reason in the Warner family chaos. Sarah threw herself into work after that, as if staying still meant having to face her grief. That's when the promotions started coming, and eventually, the offer from Anderson and Brooks. The salary was insane, the opportunities endless, and Michael Thompson's reputation in the industry was legendary. I supported her decision to take the job, of course. How could I not? She was living her dream, making a name for herself outside her father's shadow. But sometimes I wonder if that's when things started to shift, when the cracks began to form in our perfect life. A knock on the bedroom door interrupted my thoughts. "James? The car's here," Sarah called out. She sounded excited, normal. Like this was just another anniversary dinner. Like there wasn't a pregnancy test in my pocket that could blow our lives apart. I checked my phone one last time. No email from the PI yet. "Coming, honey!" I called back, straightening my tie in the mirror. The man staring back at me looked older than he had this morning. As I walked to the door, I remembered something Barbara had told me shortly before she died. Marriage isn't about being perfect, James. It's about choosing each other every day, especially on the days when it's hardest to do so. I just never imagined it would be this hard. Le Bernardin was packed, but our regular corner table waited for us, illuminated by soft candlelight. Sarah looked stunning in a black dress that probably cost more than my first car. As she sipped her champagne, I noticed her hand trembling slightly. Was it guilt, or was I seeing things that weren't there? "No wine for me tonight," she said when the sommelier approached. "Just sparkling water with lime." My throat tightened. She never turned down good wine, especially not on special occasions. The pregnancy test felt heavier in my pocket. "Are you feeling okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Never better." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, I have some exciting news about work." "Here we go." I braced myself. "Michael's considering me for the position of executive vice president." I nearly choked on my wine. EVP at 32? That was unheard of, even for Anderson and Brooks. "That's impressive," I managed. "When did this come up?" "He mentioned it during our Chicago trip last month." She was playing with her napkin, a nervous tell she'd had since college. "Of course, it would mean more responsibilities, longer hours. More time with Michael?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. "James, please don't start. Not tonight." My phone buzzed in my pocket. The PI's email? No, just a text from Sarah's father, Richard. "Need to talk. Urgent. Call me tomorrow. RW." Great. What could he possibly want? Richard Warner had been unusually quiet lately, which was suspicious in itself. Usually, he had an opinion about everything in our lives. "Dad texting you again?" Sarah asked, noticing my expression. "He's been weird lately. Called me 3 times this week asking about future plans." I forced a laugh. "Maybe he's finally ready for grandchildren." Sarah's face went pale. She quickly took a large gulp of her water, nearly choking on it. "Let's not talk about children right now," she said firmly. "Tell me about your day instead." But I couldn't focus on small talk. My mind was racing. The pregnancy test. Her refusing wine. Richard's cryptic messages. The EVP position. It was like trying to complete a puzzle while blindfolded. Then I saw him. Michael Thompson himself, walking through Le Bernardin's entrance with a gorgeous redhead on his arm. Sarah's back was to the door. She hadn't noticed them yet. "Isn't that your boss?" I asked, watching her reaction carefully. Sarah turned, and for a split second, something flashed across her face. Pain? Anger? Before I could process it, her professional mask was back in place. "Oh, that's his sister Catherine," she said smoothly. "She's visiting from Seattle." Later that night, I'd remember this moment. Because I knew Michael Thompson's family history. Sarah had mentioned once that he was an only child. It was the first direct lie I caught her in. My phone buzzed again. This time it was the PI's email. "Found something. Meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Bring checkbook. Worth every penny." Sarah was talking about her upcoming business trip to London, but I barely heard her. Tomorrow morning couldn't come fast enough. Whatever the PI had found, it had better explain why my wife was lying about her boss's non-existent sister, not drinking wine, and hiding pregnancy tests. Because right now, every possible explanation I could think of made me sick to my stomach. I didn't sleep that night. Sarah curled up on her side of the bed, further away than usual, while I stared at the ceiling counting the hours until my meeting with the PI. Around 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. She immediately grabbed it, read something, and took it to the bathroom. I heard typing, then the flush of a toilet that seemed unnecessary. By 7:30 a.m., I was sitting in a dingy diner in Queens, as far from our Manhattan social circle as possible. The PI, Frank Martinez, looked exactly like you'd expect: weathered face, cheap suit, eyes that had seen too much. "Your wife's got herself wrapped up in something big," he said, sliding a manila envelope across the sticky table. "But it ain't what you think." Inside were photos, dozens of them. Sarah entering various buildings I didn't recognize. Meeting with men in suits who definitely weren't Michael Thompson. One photo showed her talking to her father, Richard, looking angry and gesturing wildly. "Your wife's been meeting with federal agents," Frank said, lowering his voice. "And from what my sources tell me, Anderson and Brooks is under investigation for securities fraud. Major league stuff." My coffee turned sour in my stomach. "What?" "Gets better. Your father-in-law's company is somehow involved. And guess who's cooperating with the feds?" The pieces started falling into place. Sarah's strange behavior. The late nights. The mysterious trips. Richard's sudden interest in our lives. "She's an informant," I whispered. Frank nodded. "Looks like she's been working with the SEC for months. But here's what you're really paying me for: someone's threatening her. These arrived at her office last week." He pulled out more photos. Sarah entering our building. Sarah at her yoga studio. Sarah having lunch with her friend Emma. All taken with a long lens, all meant to send a message: we're watching. Jesus Christ. My hands were shaking. Does she know who's behind it? Not yet. But there's more. Frank hesitated. Your wife's been making regular visits to this place. The last photo showed Sarah entering a private medical clinic in the Upper East Side. My mind immediately went to the pregnancy test, but Frank's expression told me there was more. It's a specialist clinic. They handle high-risk pregnancies and... He paused. Genetic testing for inherited conditions. Barbara, Sarah's mother, died of breast cancer. Sarah had always been terrified of carrying the BRCA gene. I felt like the world's biggest idiot. While I'd been suspecting my wife of cheating, she'd been risking her life to expose corporate fraud and dealing with possible health issues alone. But why hadn't she told me? We used to tell each other everything. My phone buzzed a text from Sarah. "Where are you? We need to talk. Something happened at work." Frank gathered his photos. "Word of advice? Whatever she's involved in, it's dangerous. Those threat photos weren't taken by amateurs. Keep your eyes open." I left the diner with more questions than answers. The pregnancy test still nagged at me. Was Sarah really pregnant? And if so, why hide it from me? What else wasn't she telling me? As I headed home, another text came through, this time from an unknown number. "Ask your wife about Project Phoenix. Time's running out." The morning sun did nothing to warm the chill running down my spine. I found Sarah sitting at our kitchen island, still in her pajamas, hair unbrushed, a sight I'd never seen past 7 a.m. Her laptop was open, displaying what looked like financial documents. "Michael's dead," she said without looking up. The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "Car accident. Early this morning." Her voice was hollow. "They're saying brake failure." "Sarah, it wasn't an accident." She finally looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed but fierce. "Someone found out. About everything." "Project Phoenix?" I ventured. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "How do you—" "Never mind. You need to pack a bag. We're not safe here." "I know about the SEC investigation," I said. "And the threats." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "That's not even half of it." She turned her laptop toward me. "Project Phoenix isn't just fraud. It's about genetic manipulation. Military contracts. Things that would make Theranos look like a kid's science project." The documents on screen showed complex chemical formulas, trial results, and budget sheets with numbers that made my head spin. "Anderson and Brooks was just a front," she continued. "The investment firm part is real, but the real money comes from underground medical research. Michael found out by accident. He brought me in because he needed someone with both financial expertise and—" she hesitated. "Personal motivation. The genetic testing clinic," I said softly. Tears filled her eyes. "I tested positive. For the BRCA gene, and something else. Something worse. Project Phoenix was developing a cure. Not just for cancer, but for genetic disorders they hadn't even announced to the world yet." My head was spinning. "The pregnancy test was negative," she said quickly. Too quickly. We can't have children. Not with what's in my DNA. Project Phoenix was my hope for a normal life, but now—" Her phone buzzed. She looked at it and went pale. "They're here." Suddenly, our apartment lights went out. In the distance, we heard the elevator ding. Sarah grabbed her laptop and a pre-packed go bag from under the sink. She'd been preparing for this. She grabbed my hand, her skin ice cold. "Remember how we met?" she whispered urgently. "The real story?" I frowned. "At Stanford." "No. 2 months before Stanford." "Think." Before I could respond, we heard the front door lock click. Sarah pulled me toward our bedroom window and the fire escape beyond. As we climbed out into the morning air, I suddenly remembered a hacked medical database, an anonymous tip about genetic testing fraud, a mysterious email signed Phoenix's daughter. Sarah had found me first. Stanford was just her cover. Everything I thought I knew about our life together had been a carefully constructed lie. And now that lie was falling apart. As we raced down the fire escape, a figure emerged from the shadows. I nearly fell backwards. It was Sarah. Another Sarah. Identical down to the small scar above her left eyebrow. "You're late," the second Sarah said to my wife. "They're already inside." My Sarah gripped my arm. "James, meet Jessica. My twin sister." The world tilted sideways. In 5 years of marriage, Sarah had never once mentioned a twin. The genetic testing wasn't just about cancer, Jessica explained as we hurried through the alley. Project Phoenix started with twins. Genetic manipulation in utero. Some of us survived. Most didn't. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Dad kept us separated to protect us, Sarah said. Jessica was raised in Europe. Every time I mentioned family, I had to lie. The cancer story about Mom? She's alive, in witness protection. Everything was orchestrated to keep the project hidden. A black SUV screeched to a halt beside us. The driver was Richard Warner himself, looking nothing like the polished businessman I knew. He wore tactical gear and held what looked like military-grade communications equipment. They killed Michael because he discovered the twin protocol, he said as we piled in. Sarah isn't the one pregnant. Jessica is. With the first second-generation Phoenix subject. My head spun. The pregnancy test. The medical visits. The lies. The baby could prove the genetic modifications are hereditary, Jessica said, hand on her stomach. Which means billions in military contracts, Sarah finished. Human weapons that pass their capabilities to their children. Richard floored the accelerator as shots rang out behind us. There's more, Sarah said, gripping my hand. Jessica's baby, you're the father. The world went black. I came to in a secure facility, the sterile smell of antiseptic burning my nostrils. Sarah or Jessica, I wasn't sure anymore, sat beside my bed. 6 months ago, she said, they harvested your sperm while you were having your wisdom teeth removed. Remember the routine blood work before the surgery? That was them. The memory flooded back, the unusual number of tests, the extended anesthesia time, Sarah insisting on that specific dental surgeon. The pregnancy wasn't planned, she continued. Jessica was supposed to be a surrogate for a military officer. But when they discovered your genetic markers... My genetic markers? A new voice joined us. Barbara Warner, Sarah's supposedly dead mother, walked in wearing a lab coat. Your father wasn't a Minnesota accountant, James. He was one of Project Phoenix's original scientists. He died protecting the research. My entire life story crumbled. The scholarship kid story. The middle-class background. All fabricated. Your DNA is unique, Barbara explained. Combined with the twin protocol, it could create something unprecedented. A perfect genetic storm. Sarah gripped my hand. I didn't know at first. When we met at Stanford, it was real. Finding out you were Martin Chen's son came later. Martin Chen? The name felt foreign. My father's name was Peter Mitchell. Barbara shook her head. Martin Chen developed the twin protocol. He hid you with the Mitchells before he was killed. We've been searching for you for 20 years. The door burst open. Jessica rushed in, blood soaking her shirt. They found us. Richard's been shot. They're coming. Through the facility's windows, black helicopters descended. Wait, I said, a horrible thought striking me. If you're Jessica, then earlier in the car. The Sarah beside my bed smiled, but it wasn't the smile I knew. Hello, husband. Ready to finally meet your real wife? The real Sarah Mitchell stood before me, hair shorter, eyes harder. The woman I'd been living with for 5 years. Jessica backed away, positioning herself between us and the door. We switched places 2 years ago, Sarah explained, her voice lacking the warmth I'd grown accustomed to. After Mom discovered your DNA markers. Jessica was better at maintaining intimacy. My stomach lurched. 2 years? So our entire marriage was me, Jessica said softly. The real Sarah was running Project Phoenix with Michael. She needed to be on the inside. Gunfire erupted outside. Barbara rushed to a computer terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. The twin protocol wasn't just about creating identical siblings, she explained while working. It was about creating perfect duplicates. Copies that could replace anyone. Politicians. Military leaders. CEOs. The investment firm was a testing ground. Sarah continued. replace key financial players, manipulate the markets. But then we discovered something in your DNA, a mutation that could make the duplicates perfect. No tells, no genetic deterioration. Jessica's hand went to her stomach. The baby is the key. A natural-born duplicate carrier. The facility's lights turned red. Warning sirens blared. You bitch. Sarah suddenly spat at Jessica. You weren't supposed to fall in love with him. Jessica's eyes met mine. It wasn't an act. Everything we shared. A explosion rocked the building. Through the smoke, figures in tactical gear emerged. Hello, daughter. A familiar voice called out. Michael Thompson walked in, very much alive, holding a gun. Or should I say, daughters? Barbara went pale. Martin? My supposedly dead father smiled beneath Michael Thompson's face. Simulation terminated. A robotic voice announced. The facility dissolved around us like digital pixels, leaving us in a vast white room. Michael/Martin pulled off his face, literally peeled it off, revealing chrome skin underneath. Test subject 247 has failed again. The android said in my father's voice. Emotional attachment to duplicate continues to interfere with primary directive. I tried to move but couldn't. Looking down, I saw metal ports embedded in my arms. Was I an android too? Human consciousness transfer attempt 2847 unsuccessful. Barbara, now also chrome skin, noted. Original James Mitchell's memories continue to reject synthetic reality. The real Sarah stepped forward, her skin still human, tears streaming down her face. Let him remember. Please. This endless loop is torture. Protocol dictates full reset. The Martin android stated. Year 2019. Initial meeting point, Stanford MBA program. Duplicate Jessica will be reformatted. Jessica grabbed my hand, her skin was warm, human. Run the simulation 1,000,000 times, I'll always choose him over the mission. Suddenly, a new voice echoed through the white room. Override Protocol Phoenix. Everyone froze. Through the wall walked, me? But older, grayer, wearing clothes I'd never seen. Dad? Sarah and Jessica said simultaneously. The older me smiled sadly. When I created Project Phoenix in 2045, it wasn't about duplicates. It was about saving humanity. The plague is coming. These simulations, they're training programs. To prepare you for what's ahead. My head spun. What plague? The one that wipes out 99% of humanity in 2025. Unless. He looked at Jessica's stomach. Unless we can create a child with natural immunity. A child born from a duplicate and an original. The white room started to flicker. Timeline collapse imminent. The Martin android announced. The older me reached for something in his pocket. One last reset? But this time. He pulled out a red pill. You get to choose if you want to remember. I stared at the red pill in my future self's hand. How many times have we done this? In this timeline? 2,847 times. In others. He glanced at the android versions of my father and Barbara. Millions. Jessica's grip on my hand tightened. What happens if he remembers everything? The plague starts as a genetic disorder. Future James explained. It rewrites human DNA, turning people into something else. The duplicates were our attempt at creating humans resistant to the change. But we need a natural-born hybrid. The baby. Sarah whispered. In every timeline where James chooses to forget, the mission fails. The emotional connection between him and Jessica becomes corrupted by lies. But if he remembers. Future James looked at me intently. The trauma of knowing the truth has driven several versions of you insane. The white room trembled again. Reality itself seemed to be coming apart at the seams. Choose quickly. The Martin android warned. Timeline collapse in 60 seconds. Sarah stepped forward. There's something else you should know. She looked at Future James. Show him. Future James waved his hand, and suddenly the room was filled with holograms, thousands of versions of me, Sarah, and Jessica. each living slightly different lives, making different choices. But in every single one, Jessica was pregnant. It's not just about creating immunity, future James said. The baby is a fixed point in time. It has to be born. In every timeline where it isn't. The holograms shifted, showing scenes of global devastation. Billions dead. Humanity transformed into something unrecognizable. 30 seconds, the android announced. Jessica pulled out a gun. I won't let you reset him again. Not this time. Sarah drew her weapon too. The mission has to succeed. Future James held out the pill. Your choice, but remember, in every timeline where you take it, you lose one of them forever. 10 seconds. I reached for the pill, my mind racing. But as my fingers touched it, I noticed something everyone else had missed: a reflection in the chrome android's surface. A third Sarah, hiding in plain sight, with a different plan entirely. There was a triplet, I said, just as the timeline began to collapse. Future James froze. The android's eyes flickered red. Impossible. Barbara's chrome face twitched. Project Phoenix never achieved viable triplets. 5 seconds, Martin announced, but his voice wavered. The third Sarah stepped out of her hiding spot. She'd been mimicking a chrome surface all along. Project Phoenix didn't create triplets. Nature did. The simulation crackled around us like breaking glass. We're natural triplets, she explained quickly. The project didn't create us, they found us. Everything else was a lie to hide the truth. Immunity exists naturally. Future James's face contorted with rage. I realized with horror that his skin was starting to crack, revealing chrome underneath. The plague isn't coming. The third Sarah continued. It's already here. These aren't simulations to prevent it, they're tests to perfect it. They're turning everyone into androids, one timeline at a time. Jessica's pregnancy test. The genetic testing. The duplicate program. It was all a cover for something much darker. The baby isn't the cure. Third Sarah revealed. It's the last pure human that will ever be born. They've been trying to get their hands on it across every timeline. Future James lunged at her, his human disguise falling away completely. You've ruined everything. The pill in my hand started to burn. It wasn't a memory trigger, it was the virus that would start the transformation. 1 second to collapse, Martin announced. In that final moment, I made my choice. I turned to Jessica, my wife, the only real thing in this twisted reality, and saw in her eyes that she knew what I was about to do. I swallowed the pill. But I wasn't the only one who did. I woke up in our Manhattan apartment, sunlight streaming through the windows. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Sarah lay beside me, sleeping peacefully. But which Sarah was she? My phone showed the date, January 6, 2025. The day I found the pregnancy test. But something was different. I could remember everything, all 2,847 simulations, every timeline, every version of the truth. The pill hadn't erased my memories, it had crystallized them. Sarah stirred beside me. Did it work? Which version of my wife are you? I asked. She sat up, revealing a small chrome patch on her neck. All of them. When you swallowed the pill, we all did. The triplets merged into one consciousness. One truth. The baby? Safe. Still human. She touched her stomach. The androids didn't account for one thing: love isn't just an emotional attachment. It's a biological imperative. The pill couldn't override it. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael Thompson. Board meeting in an hour. Project Phoenix presentation. They don't know we remember, Sarah said. They think the reset worked. I got dressed, checking my reflection. No chrome patches visible, but I could feel the change inside. The pill had given me something else: access to every version of myself across all timelines. What's the plan? I asked. Sarah smiled, but there was steel in her eyes. Michael Thompson isn't the only one with a secret identity. Remember how I said my mother was alive? Barbara's in witness protection. No. Sarah pulled out her phone, showing me a photo that made my blood run cold. She's the head of the resistance. And today's board meeting? It's not about Project Phoenix. What's it about? It's about Project Omega. The real reason they wanted our baby. She handed me a gun. Ready to find out what humanity's really fighting for? As we headed to Anderson and Brooks, I realized the pregnancy test that started all this wasn't just a test. It was a signal. A wake-up call across timelines. The real war was about to begin. The Anderson and Brooks lobby was empty when we arrived. No security. No receptionists. Just endless chrome surfaces reflecting our distorted images. Welcome to the real Project Phoenix. Michael Thompson's voice echoed through hidden speakers. Or should I say, welcome home? The elevator opened. Inside stood the real Sarah, not the merged consciousness beside me, but my actual wife. The one I'd married 5 years ago. I'm sorry, James, she said, tears streaming down her face. I tried to protect you. The Sarah beside me pulled her gun. You betrayed us. You betrayed humanity. To save it, real Sarah responded. Show him. The chrome walls dissolved, revealing a massive laboratory. Hundreds of tanks lined the walls, each containing a developing fetus. Each one a perfect copy of the child Jessica was carrying. The androids didn't create the plague, real Sarah explained. Humanity did. The duplicate program, the genetic testing, the pregnancy, it was all to find a way to save what's left of our species. She touched her stomach. I'm pregnant too. With Michael's child. A pure android embryo. The merged Sarah's hand trembled on her gun. You're working with them? I'm leading them, real Sarah said. The triplets experiment? It was my idea. Create perfect duplicates, merge their consciousness, then use that unified consciousness to bridge human and android DNA. My head spun. The open marriage suggestion was to get you closer to Jessica, yes. We needed your DNA combined with the duplicates. But something went wrong. She looked at the merged Sarah. You weren't supposed to merge. You were supposed to fight until only one consciousness survived. The strongest one. For what purpose? I demanded. To prove that humanity's core nature is survival of the fittest. That's what the androids wanted to see. That even love couldn't overcome our basic instinct to destroy each other. The merged Sarah lowered her gun. But it did. We chose to merge rather than fight. Exactly. Real Sarah smiled. You proved them wrong. Proved that humanity's strength isn't in competition, but in unity. In love. She pressed a button. The laboratory lights turned red. Now we can begin the real experiment. Not about who deserves to survive. She looked at her stomach, then at Jessica's. But about how both species can survive together. There's something else, real Sarah said, placing her hand on a DNA scanner. We're not in 2025. We're in 2045. The time travel wasn't a simulation, it was real. The laboratory walls shifted, revealing a devastated New York skyline outside. The chrome surfaces weren't decorative, they were protective shields against the ravaged atmosphere. The plague didn't turn people into androids, she continued. It wiped out 99% of humanity. The androids were our creation vessels to preserve human consciousness until we could find a cure. The merged Sarah's face contorted with understanding. The baby is due on the day the plague begins. In every timeline, its birth triggers something in the virus. Either humanity's salvation, or its final destruction. I finished. Alarms blared. Michael Thompson's chrome form appeared on multiple screens. Sarah, his metallic voice echoed. The council has voted. They're launching the reset protocol. Total timeline erasure. Real Sarah grabbed both our hands. We have one chance. The merged consciousness was unexpected, but it's our only hope now. The triplets' combined DNA, James's genetic markers, the android embryo I'm carrying together, they could stabilize the cure. But I knew there had to be a catch. One consciousness has to be sacrificed. A soul, freely given, to anchor the change across all timelines. The merged Sarah stepped forward. I'll do it. No, real Sarah countered. It has to be the original. Me. A countdown appeared on the screens, 60 seconds to reset. James, both Sarahs turned to me. You have to choose. Save your wife, or save her copy. One lives, one dies, and your choice determines humanity's fate. I looked between them, the woman I married and the merged consciousness of her duplicates. Both pregnant. Both willing to die. Both versions of the same soul. The countdown reached 30 seconds. There's a third option, I said, remembering the reflection I'd seen in the chrome surfaces. Isn't there? The third option is me, I said, stepping between both Sarahs. I'm the bridge between all timelines. The countdown froze at 15 seconds. Impossible. Michael's voice crackled. Your consciousness isn't merged. Isn't it? I smiled. Every reset, every simulation, every timeline, they're all stored in my DNA. That's why you needed me for the baby. I'm the only human who exists simultaneously across all versions of reality. Real Sarah gasped. The pill didn't just wake me up. It completed the merger you started 20 years ago. I touched both their hands. I'm not just James Mitchell. I'm every James that ever lived, every James that died, every James that loved both of you. The laboratory began to shake. Timeline collapse accelerating. The android announced. Reset imminent. Don't you see? I looked at both Sarahs. The plague isn't a virus. It's evolution. Humanity trying to save itself by becoming something new. Not human, not android, but both. I pressed my hand against the DNA scanner. The screens filled with data. The babies aren't the cure. They're the next step. And they need all of us, human, duplicate, and android, to survive. The countdown resumed, 10 seconds. James, real Sarah whispered. If you do this, I know. I'll exist everywhere and nowhere. A consciousness spread across all timelines, holding reality together. 5 seconds. I kissed them both goodbye. Take care of our children. All of them. 3 seconds. I love you. Both Sarahs said together. 1 second. I know. The world went white. And somewhere, in every timeline, a baby took its first breath, crying with 3 distinct voices, while its father watched from across the dimensions, finally understanding what love truly meant: the willingness to exist in all realities just to keep your family safe and one.